Broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Okay. Hi, everybody. Good evening here from Finland. And we are continuing with the science of triangles. And the first part of our study has taken us into esoteric astrology. And he's giving us maybe some of the more important triangles. And when we finish this section, which will still be a little while, we're getting near the end now. Um, I'll be asking you, to evaluate the possible meanings of the various triangles. Now, for instance, if I were to say to you the triangle, um, mm, 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 mm. Yeah, I guess I could say Leo, Virgo, Aquarius. Then I would ask you what you think could be the major theme of that triangle. Or if I were to say Cancer, Leo, Pisces, or something of that nature, then you'd give me your impression of how that triangle could be used in the developmental process. But first, it will be a while, and we will go through our work in this esoteric astrology book. In that section, about 100 pages, which is entirely dedicated to the science of triangles. So I just want to welcome you, Anne and Aurea and Barbara and Brennan and Catherine, Chris, David, Georgina, Helen, Ishtar, and Judy, I guess it is, J-O it says, and Johi, Karen, Carrie, Leslie, Mariana, Nadia, Nesa, Nienke, and Patty, and Risto, Sandra, and Sharon, Vicky, Walter, Winnie, Zenaidi, and Veronica. And over here on the staff side, Michael, Joe, and Tuya, and myself. So welcome to our work together. And, make notes as we go. We're about to go into a new triangle, which he is going to elaborate just a little bit. We've been talking about the Big Dipper, especially not all the stars. I think there might be about 144 stars in the Great Bear, of which the Dipper is part. But the 7 major stars as being for us one of the proximate sources of the 7 rays, not the ultimate source of the 7 rays, that's much greater, but each one of these stars aligning not only with other solar systems, but each of them with one or more planets for which they play a very, prominent role. And of course, it's figuring out which particular star may be related to a particular planet. We'd have to come up with the sacred planets, and that basically is another way to look at triangles, which we're going to examine triangles between sacred planets and sacred and non-sacred, and then triangles simply between non-sacred planets. Each one of those triangles tells its own story, but you have to be aware of the meaning of the planets and of the signs in order to put together what that story is. But every planet at a certain time in space, and according to the law of mutation, has the first, second, and third aspects active. And sometimes it's the third in the beginning, then the intermediary stage is the second aspect, which has priority, and finally, if we ever, learn what it is to be, and to work, to identify as being, which we're going to take up again tomorrow night, then the first aspect of the triangle will be in the dominant position. So it's not only how the planets and zodiacal signs are related to each other, it's the question of time and which of the three aspects of divinity are prominent in any triangle, which has an effect on Earth. So the timing is very important, and it works out that way too in your life. I mean, you may have, let's just take a major triangle, such as head, heart, and throat. Well, they are all going to be interrelated, and increasingly so as we, continue to develop. But you can imagine that at an earlier stage of evolution, it's going to be the throat center, which is in the dominant position. Now, for people like ourselves, we want the throat center to be instrumental to the heart center. And so maybe as disciples in the making here, or, having some kind of initiation before us, because every disciple is in training for initiation, every true disciple, we will find the way to emphasize the second aspect, which would be the heart. The heart would be dominant. From some angles, it's the first aspect. From this particular angle, it's the second. And in this particular case, Saturn would be the ruler of the throat and Jupiter the ruler of the heart. So Jupiter would be dominant over Saturn and over Vulcan at that stage of evolution where a lot of us are going to find ourselves for quite a few lives. And then eventually, there will be a stage when the head is dominant and we've entered into occultism, and the heart within the head as a major center will control many things. And whether we want to call that Vulcan, or maybe sometimes we want to call it, Uranus, I guess, and Neptune, synthesizing planets, they will be the dominant factor, but we're not really there yet. We have to make, in the triangle of head, heart, and throat, we have to make the heart the dominant position in terms of this law of mutation, which has everything in a state of rational flux. In other words, it's not chaos. It's all rational development, but it is a state of constant movement over time, and we just want to know where we stand. Now, the same thing, when you're dealing with head, heart, and throat, you can take other triangles in the energy system, and you can do the same thing, well, you can do it below the diaphragm and take a look at the center of the base of the spine, ray 1, the solar plexus, ray 2, and the sacral center, ray 3. And you can start manipulating those until one fine day at the 5th initiation, the center at the base of the spine is completely dominant over the other two. So I guess my point is, it's not just what are the members of a triangle and what do they generally mean, which is good to know. It's a question of where is that triangle developmentally at this time in your many lives. Same thing goes for head, ajna, alta, major, center, and what is dominant at a particular time. Okay. So those who have joined us, welcome. Have welcomed everybody, and let's just take a look at what he says here. And I never know how far we're going to be able to actually move. But this, he's talking about a new triangle here. You know, we're considering that triangle. And whoops, that's the wrong one. You know, I say between Finnish and English and between two keyboards, you could go a little crazy here to get it all correct. All right, well, that's correct. And I'm going to, and there we go. All right. So we have discussed, and maybe you remember, a triangle consisting of Polaris, the first pointer, and the second pointer in the Big Dipper. So the two pointers are like the edge of the cup, and they're pointing towards Polaris. And you may remember that Leo rules the pointer closest to Polaris, Aries the soul, and the pointer farthest from Polaris, and then there's Polaris. Okay. And basically, you could look at them as the three fire signs, because Polaris is a great star of direction. And when, you know, Sagittarius finally gets tired of all of its errant quests, it settles down to being one pointed. So we would have Aries ruling the farthest pointer from Polaris, then Leo, the closest, and then Polaris associated with Sagittarius. Or we could maybe even associate it with Capricorn, and we would have the three first ray zodiacal signs, Aries, Leo, Capricorn. That's what we've been working on up to this point. And DK says, if you are a disciple, you may want to look at the position of some of these major stars in your horoscope, because they can maybe tell an indicative story. You know, the pointers, Polaris, Sirius, Alcyone, those kinds of stars. Okay, so now we come to some new triangle, which may have some surprising constituents in it. We come now to another triangle, the activity of which produces the manifestation of hierarchy. We were looking before at what creates Shambhala. The intermediary between Shambhala and humanity and this triangle is Scorpio, sometimes called Scorpius, like Capricorn is called Capricornus, okay, or Capricorn. Scorpio, Sirius, and Mars. Now, those are not mild energies. And there's a great struggle to live the hierarchical life. Now, it's hard to say what comes first. Sometimes he reverses things, and he takes a minor point and makes it major. Like Sirius is, even though it's approximately 33 times brighter than our sun, So it has what's called 33 solar luminosities. It's still a dwarf star. And inside this great constellation, Scorpio, is that immense star of Antares. So big that if you put its center on the center of our sun, the radius of Antares would go all the way out beyond Mars. It's that big. So I don't know how many astronomical units, more than one, because an astronomical unit is the distance from the sun to the earth, and then you measure everything else accordingly. So in my opinion, yes, indeed, Scorpio is the much more powerful source than Sirius. But for us, Sirius is tremendously important. Now, you'll notice in this triangle, Mars is both the orthodox and esoteric ruler of Scorpio. It's the internal battle that as disciples we all go through in the effort to clear ourselves and be truly translucent and eventually transparent to the higher energies. But Sirius is the sponsor of our great hierarchy. You know, on Sirius, there's the Great White Lodge, and also something called the Blue Lodge, of which modern Masonry, the first 3 degrees, is kind of the allegorical reflection. And Sirius, it's not just an easy star, you know. It was the great star of the Egyptians, and they called it Isis. You know, Tuya's research into all this has come up with some amazing stuff about Sirius, Egypt, and the effect of Sirius on our Earth. And the DK says, look, it's responsible for the initiation of our solar logos. So to us, it's a tremendous source. And and I guess the point I want to make is that it appears, at least in the Northern Hemisphere, at maybe the hottest time of the year. And for whatever reason, and not just physical reasons, it's called the scorcher, you know, which means really to be badly burned. So this fire from Sirius is part of the general tremendous testing process that involves Scorpio and Mars. Mars, pretty well, I think in this case, represents the third aspect, and fire by friction and all the major conflicts that allow us to enter the hierarchy, which Sirius represents. Mars and Saturn are called sometimes malefic planets because they give the personality a hard time, but they're very benefic, if I can say. And they are 2 planets, along with Scorpio and Capricorn, which they rule, that bring you truly into the hierarchy because you've passed all these tests. So this has to be a very testing triangle. And I would say a person who has a strong Scorpio ascendant or Scorpio sun or Scorpio stellium should locate where Sirius is and where Mars is, and maybe the positioning of that triangle will tell them something important about the struggles in their life to become a true initiate one day. So these energies in relation to our Earth produce the 4 streams of energy initiating and transmitting, which lead humanity towards discipleship and initiation. Maybe not so much aspiration, though there is a way that you can combine Cancer, Capricorn, and Sirius, and it will have to do with the path of probation. See, you can turn everything every which way, and depending upon your angle of vision, so will be the meaning of what you are seeing. Obviously, constellations here on Earth look different than if you were placed 90 degrees to the side or another side, or above or below. In the point of view and in the geometry produced by your point of view relative to an asterism like the Big Dipper, will be the meaning for you or for your planet or your, whatever you're living on, of that Big Dipper. It will have a general meaning, but the Big Dipper always does have a general meaning. It produces the 7 rays, but something different and unique, depending on your point of view, will emerge for you, depending on your angle of vision. So 4 streams of energy. Okay, so maybe I've actually spoken here of what this means. This stuff in red. I have Scorpio and Capricorn, 2 hierarchically related constellations. And here's an interesting point. Now, if you, I think we'll do the great invocation afterwards. Okay, we'll do that. If you go to page 50 of your esoteric astrology book, you're going to see that Mars, along with Taurus and Scorpio, I'm a little bit out of alignment here, but is the conduit for the 7 solar systems, of which ours is one. So there we have a constellation of which our sun is the heart center. Then we have the 2 signs or constellations, Taurus, Scorpio, considered together in their interplay, and Mars gives you the outworking of this triple system. This is all very intricate, and Master DK, of course, is an expert in these matters of the signs, constellations, and planets, and the creative hierarchy. So basically, he's an expert astrologer, rheologist, and a person who knows the most in the contemporary hierarchy about the creative hierarchies. So magnetic energy or solar fire is involved in this particular triangle, and that may come as a surprise when you look at it. But the 7 solar systems, I think, may be able to be looked at as a kind of solar plexus of a much greater entity. And we know that Mars, at least for the individual, rules the solar plexus. And the whole question of desire connects with the solar plexus, and the 2 planets, or two constellations of the greatest desire are Taurus and Scorpio. So I think there's a lot to be said here for our neighboring cosmic logos consisting of 7 suns, being a solar plexus in a much greater being. So that tells you about a triangle which gives you that indication. Page 50 should be studied. And well, I don't want to do too much here, but let's just say that there are connections here with Cancer, Capricorn, Saturn, and Sirius. And sometimes these have to do with the path of probation. And the Great Bear with Aries and Libra, more the path of initiation. And the Pleiades with Gemini and Sagittarius and Mercury, more with the path of discipleship. It all depends on your angle of vision. That is key. Okay. Now, where was I? Okay. So Mars is the conduit for the 7 solar systems, of which ours is one, and is connected, in this case, with solar fire. And it's also the conduit for the Scorpio Sirius relationship that we've just been talking about. So Scorpio, Sirius, Mars. Well, these are high things, and basically the hierarchy itself is working on them. These are things in a way that are lying ahead of them. So all we can have is sort of the the basic structural idea of some of these tremendous triangles which condition life in our solar system. I mean, you can imagine if our sun is a great heart center in a cosmic logos, then everything that we do in our solar system is going to be part of the heart. And love, wisdom will lie at the heart of everything we do. All right. So, okay, well, that's an esoteric astrological point. The question is, and sometime we'll explore it, what are the 7 solar systems, of which ours is one? And is Sirius a member of that, even though it has its own independent kind of process? And, you know, I can name an Ajna center with Procyon and our sun as the heart, and Sirius maybe as the crown center, and Alpha and Beta Centauri, you know, having more to do with the sacral center and so forth. But all of that is speculative. And when you start talking about, well, if you're going to talk about triangles between zodiacal signs, which we do all the time, you have to be able to talk about triangles between stars. For instance, Sirius, the dog star, Procyon, the little dog, and our sun. Our sun is the lowest of those. The aspirant trying to leave our non-sacred sun, so far non-sacred, goes via Procyon towards Sirius, which is the crown. So Sirius in that triangle has a much more powerful meaning, and it's the true initiate, okay, in a cosmic sense. Procyon leads to that, and our sun is the starting point. So you can make triangles between stars, or at least recognize them. Because if you're doing it for constellations and you're doing it for planets, which we do all the time, then you have to do it between stars as well. So what have we got here so far? The triangle of Shambhala, aided by two first-rate planets. Okay, we have pointer number 1, Aries, Earth, and which is Shambhala. So pointer 1, Aries, and Shambhala, and then Vulcan and Pluto add to that. And we were exploring that before, weren't we? There it is. So Aries, pointer, and Earth, aided by two first-rate planets. This is a shambalically stimulating triangle. And when we look at Earth, we think of Shambhala, which is the first point of reception. So you have a greater triangle and a lesser triangle, and we combine them. Okay. Then what else have we got? Well, what I'm elaborating here. Right. Triangle of hierarchy. Scorpio, Sirius, and Mars. Now think of it this way. Put that triangle in action, and it demands the burning away of all our impurities. Now that's, the path of purification, the fiery path, may end physically relatively early in the process. But what about emotional purification? What about mental purification? What about purification as it goes even higher than those particular personality vehicles? So we have the triangle of Shambhala and that fivefold diagram, two triangles really. We have the triangle of hierarchy, Scorpio, Sirius, and Mars, demanding the burning away of all impurities. And always there's going to be a struggle. If you're in the middle, you're going to struggle. And hierarchy is in the middle. From that point of view, Shambhala is a place of relatively perfect peace, transcending the struggle that exists in hierarchy. So this triangle will help us if we conquer in Scorpio, if we follow the laws of initiation and the requirements that Sirius imposes on our planet, and if we have the courage of Mars to directly confront what needs to be dealt with, we can enter the hierarchy. So that's why it's very important. And then the triangle of humanity, which must have been instrumental in establishing humanity, because there was a time when there was no humanity on our globe. There was simply a kind of an animal man who was not individualized yet, and that would be Leo, the most human of all the signs. Leo, Polaris, and pointer number 2, or let's call it the pointer closest to Polaris. Leo, the most human of all the signs, and very active, interestingly, very active at the time of individualization on our planet. We don't know about what happened on the moon chain in terms of those constellations. We don't know what happened in the previous major solar system in terms of these particular constellations. We might be able to imagine, but in our planetary chain, the Earth chain, and on our globe, Leo was active at individualization. And when you want to, now that was a change of kingdom from the high part of the third kingdom into a newly made fourth kingdom. There's an analogy here. When you take the first initiation, you are also changing kingdoms. you are stepping into the fifth kingdom via the fifth petal of the egoic lotus. And Leo, either the sun in Leo or Leo rising, is a possible signature for taking the first initiation. If you are at that stage, look, a horoscope does not guarantee anything. You have to be at the stage in order to take advantage of the indicators that can tell you first initiation, second, third. Capricorn may be associated with the third initiation most of all, but unless you are at that stage where you can take advantage of Capricorn in that way, then just being a Capricorn doesn't say anything about taking the third initiation. As a matter of fact, Capricorn is active at all the first three initiations. And if we, here, I'll give you a triangle. I want to do more and more of that. Suppose I give you the triangle Leo, Scorpio, Capricorn. Just pause for a minute. What would you think that could indicate, that triangle? I'm not going to stop right now to get your answer, but later, if you have an idea, you can let us know. Leo, Scorpio, Capricorn. It's a very powerful triangle. And what does it, evoke in your mind when you think of it? Okay. So when Leo is strong, humanity is strong, and individualization is just like the first initiation, only millions of years earlier. You're changing kingdoms, and what it means to be a human being changes, because you are a human being who is entering the kingdom of souls rather than an animal who is just becoming a human being under Leo. Well, the pointer closest to the Polaris would be the one who's involved. And we could even, every time you see Sirius, on a higher turn of the spiral, you might be able to substitute the entire constellation of the Little Bear. Now, another triangle of importance, that's what I'm going to do from time to time, mention triangles of importance and hint at their meaning, and then you try to also think about it. The Big Bear, the Little Bear, and the Pleiades. He mentions it only once. Instead of Big Bear, or, Great Bear, Sirius and Pleiades. What could that be? The Dipper, the Little Dipper, which is the Little Bear, or part of that constellation, and then Pleiades. What could that mean? So we'll hold off on that, and maybe you have an idea of what that could be. Obviously, it's operating in a cosmic sense and affects the whole solar system, and even our local constellation called the 7 solar systems, of which ours is one. And also, Shambhala, hierarchy, and humanity, they are reflecting these possibilities found cosmically. So these relationships, they help our planetary logos to become a sacred planetary logos. When's that going to take place? It's going to take place when a fifth initiation is taken by our planetary logos. But what fifth initiation? Is it a fifth initiation having to do with a lesser series of 7 initiations? Go to Cosmic Fire, page 384. You'll see that there, something like that. Or is it a scheme-wide fifth initiation? In other words, does our planet become a sacred planet when a fifth subsidiary initiation is taken, just the way we're presently taking a fourth subsidiary initiation, or when a cosmic initiation is taken? And in terms of cosmic initiations, our planetary logos has only taken one. In terms of subsidiary initiations, it's passing through a fourth initiation, which is using our chain, the Earth chain, to work out the process. And, you know, obviously there's a lot of being torn on the cross in that process, and we are experiencing it. Okay. When the work of all these triangles has been concluded, says the Tibetan, humanity, and in a mysterious sense, our Earth, will be functioning in perfect rhythm. Now, and will respond to the energies pouring in from Alcyone, the central star of the Pleiades. Alcyone associated with Aquarius and humanity and the Earth. Now, those who learn through rhythm, now let's make an analogy. We'll go back to the beginning of Letters on Occult Meditation, where he tells you how to break a causal body. And the souls on the fourth ray, they use beauty and rhythm to break the causal body. They learn through rhythm rather than chaos, which is often the way it is in the beginning with, how does he put it, confused combat. In other words, I'm fighting you, I'm fighting the opposite, I'm fighting myself. This is the way it goes with the fourth ray until a beautiful harmony and rhythmic method takes over. And then, true beauty emerges. I could go hunting for that right now, but just go to the beginning of Letters on Occult Meditation, and you will see somewhere, 14 or 15 pages in, you will see the different methods of destroying the causal body and, the great artists and their mastery of rhythm. It has a lot to do with the fourth ray. And as far as rhythm goes, the seventh ray as well is involved, and he calls the fourth ray and the seventh ray the two practically artistic rays. He goes on, I cannot too strongly repeat that esoteric astrology is entirely concerned with the forces and energies which affect the consciousness aspect, of the human being and condition the personality life. This is a point which must be considered above all else. Now, if you're interested in the astrology of events, what's going to happen to me, regardless of what it means, that's not esoteric astrology. The astrology regarding the growth of consciousness is esoteric astrology. In other words, he says, esoteric astrology is concerned with the soul, which is the consciousness, and not with the form. Think about that. Now, I sometimes think that a really good astrologer knows a lot about form and a lot about consciousness. You know, you really can't leave form out of the picture, because how we treat the form and its condition and conditioning can have a lot to do with what happens to our consciousness. But the major goal is the elevation of consciousness, and we always want to watch out for what it is that suppresses consciousness. That would be part of esoteric astrology also. In other words, esoteric astrology is concerned with the soul and not with the form. And one of the first things DK is going to give, he seems to say, around the year 2025, is more and deeper astrological information. Therefore, all that I have to say refers to consciousness, he says, to its expansion, think Jupiter, to its effect upon its vehicles, think of psyche and soma, psychosomatic, to its effect upon its vehicles, the form, and in the last analysis, as will be later established, with the science of initiation. Now, that'll be interesting to do sometime. We can talk about the triangles that are involved at the various initiations. And if you turn to a treatise on cosmic fire, right around 169 or 170, you will see some of those triangles. So, the advancement of consciousness, which is the main goal of esoteric astrology, occurs through progressive initiations and vice versa. So unless there is some experience with the soul and its meaning, esoteric astrology cannot be meaningfully applied. Now, there's always going to be a triangle of rulers. Sometimes there's only two planets, but they still constitute a triangle. Like for Cancer, the moon, lower Neptune, or the moon, middle Neptune, and higher Neptune, or lower Neptune, middle Neptune, and higher Neptune. Those would be a triangular rulership of the sign Cancer. But suffice it to say that when initiation is a possibility, and every true disciple is working towards initiation, whether it occurs in this life or in the next or the next, a triangle will give the hint. The completion of a triangle will probably bring initiation. When you complete the triangle of head, ajna, and alta, you can become a third-degree initiate and a true esoteric healer. At least you are that in the beginning phases. But it takes a lot to get that, the energy of that particular triangle circulating. So it's the astrology of the soul, and it's all we know. It's just the ABCs. We know right now virtually nothing about the astrology of the soul on its own plane. What we do know a little bit about through DK is how the soul affects the personality as judged from the horoscope and an assessment of rays. So we can't really look at the soul on its own plane and say, oh, that's the astrology of the soul on its own plane. But we can look at the personality and say, this is the soul's influence within that point of tension we call the personality. So he says, look, I pointed this out before. This I've earlier pointed out, but the idea is so new and the approach so universal, as we probably detected, and or cosmic, that it is not easy for those trained in modern exoteric astrology truly to comprehend the significance of this teaching. Let's see, what have I don't know, I've misspelled a word here. Reversion, I suppose. We don't want to go backwards, and we don't want to say we're an esoteric astrologer when all we can do is deal with the fate of the personality without knowing the meaning of that fate. Good things can happen and bad things can happen from the usual personality perspective. But if bad things happen and you know the meaning, that's good. And if good things happen to the personality and you don't know the meaning, that's bad. So this is all about the astrology of meaning when soul consciousness is beginning to develop. The world of the soul is the world of meaning. You know, personality, the world of effects, soul, the world of meaning, triad, the world of significances, monad, the world of being, logoic plane, the world of ultimate causes on the cosmic physical plane. So effects, meaning, significance, being, causation. I mean, you know, those are generalities, of course. In considering the triangles, which I have chosen to use as the theme in elucidating this immense subject, this emphasis upon the consciousness aspect must not be forgotten. Who are we as a sensitive, internal being who is subtly touching other spheres of activity? You know, what really is our consciousness? It has to do in many ways with the sense of touch. From a certain perspective, the world of the personality is the world of hearing. The world of the soul is the world of touch. The world of the monad, monad triad as one thing, is the world of sight, looking at the progression of the lowest three of the senses. You know, DK has given us books within books within books, even though he just wrote one big book. And if you start putting together the implications of what he's written, it's like a castle, like the head center, you know, sometimes going up through many layers. And much more is given than we imagine if we would just put it together. And when we do put it together, then we are developing what the Tibetan calls pure reason, which is a Buddhic faculty, an intuitive faculty related to the Buddhic plane. So I guess what I would just say, the fundamental thing is to be related to two other people and transmit light, goodwill, love, and eventually the will to good between us, between the three, because that will be the practical side of making the work of the men and women of goodwill effective. If the triangles underlie the efforts of the men and women of goodwill, they will be successful. So from a practical point of view, that's the important thing. But then from the theoretical point of view, it's just an immense study, in a way within a still more immense study, which I think should be called the science of relations. The science of relations, of which esoteric astrology and rayology and chakrology, you know, are all subsidiary parts. So, you know, you want to look at your own life and you want to somehow evaluate the state of your consciousness. And has it changed over the years, or are you somehow stuck in certain places that just don't give way to positive change? There are people like that, you know. Has it deepened? Has our consciousness deepened? Can we use esoteric astrology and rayology and the science of triangles to deepen our consciousness? Has it expanded? It is the consciousness which ultimately persists and ultimately by which we are known. When the Tibetan looks at us, he's not, you know, so much looking at the personality. That's the world of effects. He knows what that is, but he's looking at the state of our consciousness as reflected in the various vehicles. And, you know, it's interesting because it's so much different than what people normally think, but it is the consciousness itself which produces the vehicle of consciousness. We have the wrong end of the stick, you know. We think that everything is epiphenomenon of matter. Consciousness arises out of matter. Well, you know, it's exactly reversed. So what we're studying here is all about how to deepen and expand the consciousness using various of the streams of energy to which we have access. And when some of those streams combine in triangular fashion, you have maybe the completion of a unit of work. Until the triangle comes into focus, polarities are not resolved. The third point is what resolves the polarity and causes rotation instead of oscillation. We can go back and forth between this and that, high and low, up and down, whatever. But the third point starts to generate eventually the circle and the sphere. And so maybe it's significant that while the etheric body of sacred planets is composed of triangles, not squares, the etheric body of the sun is composed of interlocking circles, or maybe it's spheres, something circular, spherical. So rotation has to begin, and the triangle, when it is completed, it starts us on on the path to rotation, circulation, and the Trinity proves true, the three become the one. And the one is symbolized by the circle or the sphere. Okay, so that will be it for right now. And, you know, I realize that I'm doing a lot of branching out, you know, and a lot of elaboration. And so we don't cover a whole lot of pages. We're on page 484 and we've done one page, 483 to 484. And, but okay, the idea is if you can make progress towards pure reason by linking all of these relations together in a meaningful way in your mind, then there is real progress. Remember, when you say this is meaningful, ultimately what you're saying is that you are viewing it from the perspective of the soul, which is your consciousness, which esoteric astrology nurtures, cultivates. So the 1st of July, and we'll be moving on to number 7, 7T, from page 484. And I'm not exactly, when is the full moon? Is it, I should know that, but if we add a few.
The full moon is July 5th, 4:44 and 16 a.m. GMT.
Okay, we're good then. So on the 8th, we'll meet again, and it'll be a morning discussion. And what I'd like you to feel is that somehow in all of this, you are getting a better grasp of the great science of relations. This is the world of relativity in which we are existing, relativity. It is also, from a deeper perspective, the world of being and identicality, but one studies those in a different way. One does not study those with the meticulous entirety, you know, DK's brilliant choice of words. One does not study being and identicality through meticulous entirety. It sounds like a bunch of big words, but you're looking at a uniformity of all things, and you don't need meticulous entirety to study that intricacy of the divine process. But when it comes to the great science of relations, you do need meticulous entirety. You do need eventually pure reason. And that's what I hope that this kind of approach will give us, from the squares to the triangles, or another way of doing it, from the squares to the stars, to the triangles, to the circles or spheres. That's our progression until one day the universal sphere, or the universal ring pass not, limited only by universal self-perception, will become our perception. That's a long, well, we've been through it endlessly, but it's so in Earth years, I wouldn't want to calculate it, okay? How much lies ahead. Okay, So if you have any thoughts you would like to share, any questions you would like to ask on this material or the general science of occultism, this is the time to do it, because basically with occultism, you can start anywhere and end up anywhere. In other words, everything is related to everything else. So in the great sphere of relationships, there's nothing that can be perceived which is unrelated to something else which can be perceived. You can always get to any point from any point. Okay. Anything, now I know maybe some of you, God help us all. I mean, we have to be new to esoteric astrology at some time. So a lot of this looks like complication. And how do I ever master all this? I can't tell you how to master it because I haven't mastered it, but I can just say, start by reading the book carefully. Or if you wish, you can do the video series that I've made word for word on this book with 70 something programs, I guess, and 160 something hours. A lot to study, but it's word for word. So, if you finish that process, you're going to know a lot more about esoteric astrology and the way the science of triangles works within it. Okay. Is there anybody that has anything you'd like to say, write, ask, offer, etc.?
We have a question from J.O. In response to your first question, answer, second initiation, your second question, the one about who taught may be said. Oh, who not may be said.
What about whom?
The
not
one about whom
said.
not may be said.
Yes. And what about that one? Because there are many ones about whom not may be said. And I'll show you where it begins. There is an initial one about whom not may be said, and I'll point it out on a chart, okay? We just don't know enough to say anything, but we can always try. Okay, so that's the F, and these are the ones, these 2 years diagrams, and this chart on page 344 of Cosmic Fire. And the term has to do with such an inclusive logos that at the very beginning, this logos has for its chakras entire constellations. So on the map, the biggest map, which the Tibetan himself gives us, this little green triangle is, in my estimation, our local one about whom naught may be said, of which there are 49 and 7 per these big circles, which I call sub parabrahmic logoi. And then comes this being called a cosmic parabrahm. I don't know how big that is. Could be the galaxy, but I don't think so. I think it's not big enough yet. So this is one out of whom the 7 stars of the Great Bear come, our particular solar system. Nothing else is listed. There's no room for it on this particular map. But if we turn to cosmic fire, page 293, I believe, we have a being called the Unknown. Now, that's not the end of the story, but this Unknown functions through 5 cosmic planes, which are cosmically Brahma. The 5 are Brahma, one above it is Vishnu, and one cosmic plane above that is Shiva. So when we look at these 5 cosmic planes, they are cosmic Brahma. You know, this is the Hindu Trimurti or the Hindu Trinity. And so this is the head of Brahma, and it functions through these 5, including the cosmic atmic. Then comes cosmic monadic, then comes, which is Vishnu's or Surya, and then comes cosmic, logoic, cosmic logoic, or cosmic adic, as it's called, the very first. And that is the great being that includes everything underneath it. And he's just one. Now, if we really see that triangle, now just, you know, keep your eye on the triangle, because I'm going to switch from that triangle to something else in the Theosophist. And here we have point D and AAB diagrams, and that cosmic parabrahm is probably just one of these 7-fold beings. There are 7 probable cosmic parabrahms, and on it goes. You know, you've got to have galaxies and families of galaxies until you reach the very top. So, and all of them would be called ones about whom naught may be said. All of them. But our closest one about whom naught may be said is pictured, not pictured, but mentioned here on the tabulation on page 293, and it's called the Unknown. Now look at the progression. Here's our solar logos and our solar system, and the centers are planets, let's just say heavenly men. Then this solar logos is a chakra in a cosmic logos, and its centers are solar logoi, or stars, you know. And then there's this being called the Unknown that we can name maybe the first level of one about whom naught may be said, and its chakras are constellations, solar systems. And that's as far as we have gone, but you just know that there's going to be some being there that has galaxies as its chakras. And a still greater being that has families of galaxies as its chakras. And on we go until we reach the one and only in any particular universe. So it's a relative term when we say the one about whom naught may be said. First, in one way, we call it a supercosmic logos above a cosmic logos, okay? And from another perspective, it's just a being that is the lowest rung of other unknown to us, and unknown to the greatest master, or Diane Chohan, in our solar system, and unknown even to a solar logos. That's how far it goes, you know, the whole ladder of being, or the ladder of existences. You get some idea of the ladder of existences, a limited idea, by turning to page 844 of Cosmic Fire, tabulation 6. And it doesn't even go as far as solar logoi, and yet all of these, the 3 major planetary logoi, the 4 minor planetary logoi, the informing lives of a planetary globe. He seemed to skip the planetary chain. The informing lives of a kingdom in nature, the solar angels, the solar Petries, human evolution, the lunar Petries. This is a big ladder, a ladder of progressive beings. And, you know, we can learn a little bit about each one, and the higher you go on the initiatory scale, the more you're going to know. But it doesn't even include what's on page 293. It doesn't include a solar logos. It doesn't include a cosmic logos. It doesn't include a supercosmic logos, and on and on and on. So there's a huge ladder of evolutionary power and scope. And, you know, we haven't the slightest idea of all that's included in that ladder. But we know there necessarily must be a principle of hierarchy at work, a hierarchical structure to our universe, and maybe to every universe that's ever been. So the one about, in summation, the one about whom naught may be said is a relative term for a being in whom we live and move and have our being, about which we know really nothing, except that it exists, and something maybe about its relative place on the ladder. I hope that clarifies a little bit. It's a supercosmic logos at the beginning level, with constellations as its chakras.
Are you ready for another question?
Are you ready for another answer?
Well, I think so. Carrie's got a question for you.
Does the Great Bear utilize the Little Bear to transmit the 7 rays further? I would say yes. Yes, I would say yes, because there's a Sirian group of ray transmissions that come from the Great Bear, but really Sirius is a blind for the Little Bear. You understand that the scope of Sirius is so minuscule compared to the scope of the 7 rishis that the Little Bear is much more in proportion. So yes, but it doesn't stop there. The number 21 is honored because we go on to the 7 major Pleiades out of 1,000, maybe almost 1,000. And the more material aspect of the 7 rays is transmitted via those 7 Pleiades. So it's 7 plus 7 plus 7 is 21, and add to it the wholeness of the 3 sevens, and you get the first of the, well, you get the numerological magic number 22, which has an awful lot to do with our solar system, with its presently, with its second ray personality and its second ray soul. And eventually, I think it's second ray monad 222. Okay, so going on. And if so, does the LB, Little Bear, receive ray. Aha. Well, that's a correspondential question. In general, the little bear is the sun, and so represents the second aspect of divinity. But you might well ask, is Polaris the end star of the little bear, and does it therefore, analogously to the tail of the great bear, kind of transmit array 1? And I think there is justification for that assumption. And so on, conforming to the Great Bear's rays 1 through 7. So yes, and I have not worked out, I don't know anybody particularly who's gone through major 7 stars of the little bear and worked out the correspondences. Are they done geometrically? Maybe. You know, when you look at those two together with the dragon in the middle, maybe there's a way to make the correspondences fit somehow, with Polaris taking up as a brilliant star of direction the first ray, maybe representing the monad. The pole star, it is at the present time the pole star of our Earth. It won't always be, but if you think that our Earth has a first ray monad, there may be some significance to the emerging of the first ray through Polaris when there is an orientation of the axis of Earth towards Polaris every, I don't know, every great Platonic age it happens. So yes, you could play with correspondences there. You know, it's pretty intricate and we have no way of knowing for sure, but you could play with that. And if you look up the lore of the various stars, I mean, I can't even name the stars in the Little Bear, but I know there are a few that are more significant in terms of power than others. There's a lore associated with each one of these local naked eye stars. And if you read maybe Richard Hinckley Allen's star names, maybe the book was written more than 100 years ago, but it takes the traditions from different cultures and associates them with the star. You know, you might get Chinese and Arabic and even Christian, and you'll get different traditions weighing in on the meaning of each star. Then you could cross-reference them, but you know, if that's not something that I have carried too far. And maybe Nicholas Nelen, you know, he's interested in these matters, and maybe he has carried it farther. It would be quite a study, and would certainly abstract us in a certain sense from the from the immediate, you might say. Okay. So, you know, it's a high question, and it has to do with the law of correspondences, and it has to do with the fact that the Little Bear is much more powerful than Sirius, and Sirius is a blind for the Little Bear. He talks about the significance of Great Bear Father, Little Bear Son, and Pleiades Mother. He develops that a little bit, and we could develop it further if we were of a mind to try. Okay, that's all I can say about that, Carrie. Now, what else? Karsten here?
I think Michael Stacy resolved that.
Oh, good. Okay, that'd be good, because you know, when it comes to the Esoteric United Nations, it was Tuya's idea from the beginning, and I look at her as being in charge of it, and I kind of assist how I can. So she generally will have the meanings of things, and Michael's working closely with it. So good. I'm glad that's taken care of, because I probably wouldn't know what to say. Okay, that's Carrie. Okay, and is that it then in terms of people wanting to say something, ask something, etc.?
It appears so, unless a hand pops up.
Okay. Well, look, you know, DK has given us the ABCs of occultism. And according to our power of combination and relationship, maybe we can get the DEF out of it too, you know, a little bit. In other words, there's a lot that's hidden or implied in what he's given. Just like Alice Betty said. She said, you know, I was working with the Tibetan, and while he was dictating, such vistas would appear that I was just amazed. Of course, she didn't write them down because she was taking his dictation, and she wrote down what he said, or whatever their method was. They worked out a particular type of English, which was very appropriate for these subjects between themselves. Later, it became very fluid. In the beginning, you could tell what was the Tibetan style and what was Alice Bailey's style, because somehow he had quite a knowledge of English, but it was a much older form of English. And eventually, it was developed into the fluid language which they used together. So we're in a position to study the books within the books within the books. Now, of course, studying just what's in what he wrote is enough, but there's also the possibility of using what he wrote to suggest what he didn't write. And that would be intelligent speculation, leading eventually to straight knowledge and pure reason, and a meticulous grasp of the whole of what he has implied. Well, if we were initiates of the 4th and 5th degree, we'd have that, but we have our limitations. The monad really is coming into play at the 4th degree. Its influence may be felt at the 3rd, but a more direct line of monadic awareness comes in at the 4th degree. And just the way that the last 2 books of the Yoga Sutras by Patanjali are studied by masters, if you can imagine, high initiates and masters. So I suspect there's a lot that DK wrote that can be studied by high initiates and maybe even masters. DK has, he says, 5 masters working in his ashram. And one of the things that really stopped me in my tracks, I've been working on externalization of the hierarchy, and there's only 30 pages left. And so, you know, in a way I finished the book, but then I went back to the beginning. And he says, my ashram is most concerned with right human relations. Now, you know, as such an expert in the energies and such a healer and such a cosmologist, you might not think that something so simple, apparently simple, as right human relations would be the energy of his ashram. But in the beginning phases of the externalization of the hierarchy, we have Master KH, Master M, and English Master on the third ray, Master R, and then Master DK, whose energy is that of right human relations. I think that requires a lot of pondering, and I began to think maybe that tells us that while Master Kuthumi is in charge of the entire second ray ashram, Master DK, though having a lot of the third ray, just the way the Buddha does and did, may be working on the 2/2 subsection of the Great Ray Ashram with 5 masters below. In the subsidiary ashrams, I don't know, for him, we have to account for the third ray as such an expert astrologer as he is. But at the same time, right human relations, well, that's really on the second ray. So there's a bit of a mystery there that I'm trying to think about, where he fits in that. And you know, if you take out your 6 pennies and put one in the middle, that will make the 1 plus the 6, this hexagon with 1 in the middle. And I've sometimes thought that what's in the middle is 2/2, which is really Master KH. But then there are other discussions about KH embracing all 7, which is a different point of view. Suffice it to say, each one of us one day will awaken to the subsidiary ashram with which we may be associated during the externalization. Already the hint is probably there. So he deals quite a bit in the book Externalization of the Hierarchy with these subsidiary ashrams without going into detail about what any one of them does. And our first contact is in a way with one of those subsidiaries, and then with the entire Ray Ashram, which is ruled by Master KH. And right now I'm just dealing with the second ray because it is the Ray Ashram that is the most developed and the most, in a way, in manifestation, even though the master himself may not be one of the first to manifest. You've always got to have the second ray, at least in our solar system, in the first position, because education regarding all of the other ashrams and their interrelationships is so necessary, and the second ray carries this educative note which gets things started. Okay, any questions? Any thoughts? Any statements? Okay. And here's Carrie clarifying, since the structure of the Great Bear and the Little Bear is almost identical. Yeah, I understood what you meant. Ray 1 might therefore be through the tail of the Little Bear and not Polaris. I guess it depends on how you look at it, the tail of the Little Bear. Let's see if we can take a look at something here. Ray 2, next in line, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah, it's possible. How we would ever confirm that, only through the lore that is associated with these different stars. Now, if I was to go to Google, my friend Google, and let's see here. Let's just see Great Bear, little bear. And maybe, okay. Well, that's the thing, with Polaris, of course, it's pivoted around here. I'm not quite sure how this goes, but Polaris might indeed be the tail. You see how the 2 pointers are pointing towards Polaris, and even though it's inverted with the little with the dragon coming between, the star here, this is not especially rightly oriented. I wonder if I can find any. See here we do see that the pointers point towards Polaris, and it has the position of the tail. Here the same. Here are the 2 pointers, and Polaris has the position in the tail. So I guess it depends on what we consider to be the tail of the little bear. Here again, pointer, what can we call it? Well, really, I mean, which is 1 and which is 2? If we say the Leo star is 1 and the Aries star is 2, then they orient towards Polaris. And have I gotten lost here? They orient towards Polaris, and it would be analogously, yeah, the tail. So maybe between Bennett Nash and Polaris, there is an analogy. And between Mizar and whatever the second star may be, and so forth and so forth. But of course, the lore connected with the little bear and its stars, since they are considerably less potent in mythology than the stars of the 7 rishis, maybe it's a little harder to access, but I'm sure it could be done. Anyway, it's a good question, Carrie, and tests out the law of correspondences. Now, of course, it's so far up there that we can make an intelligent speculation, but we just don't know whether we've done anything truthful. It's speculative. And there's kind of a, right within the jewel box itself, the Alcyone and the other major Pleiades, we have the wives of the 7 rishis. So if we could find out which of the 7 sisters is married to which of the rishis, we could also connect it to the little bear once we have succeeded in aligning the big bear and the little bear, or the dipper part of the big bear and the little bear. Yes, Antares, this is from Joe Garso. You mentioned that Antares is vastly larger than Sirius. Somehow that comment flipped my vision of the sky. I'm wondering if, for example, Antares could be in the being beyond the one about whom naught may be said. Well, I just don't know. There are stars of tremendous solar luminosities right in Orion, and we know that Orion has some incredible supergiants like Betelgeuse, and those in the belt. So simply because a star is huge with many solar luminosities does not mean it cannot be included within our local one about whom naught may be said. Now, we could have a little fun here. if it's fun. And we could say like this. Maybe we can find it. How many solar luminosities does BETELGEUSE have? 140,000 solar luminosities. Now, look, we don't know whether these figures are exactly correct. It's a big star. It's 140,000 times more luminous than the sun. A solar mass of 18 solar masses, I guess it's not very dense, and a diameter of 1180 times the sun. Now we'd have to start comparing these things. So we got 140,000 here with Betelgeuse. You know, Betelgeuse is sort of like the heart center of Orion. It's a great second-ray star. And its activation of late has sent masses of second-ray energy into our system. Now let's have some more fun. All right. Aha. Well, so Antares, although very big, is apparently only half the solar luminosities of Betelgeuse. And as far as its extent, I don't know. You know, it is something to study as the enemy of Mars. Let's see, how many astronomical units does Antares occupy? I don't know. You know, it's probably not the best way to phrase it. Antares. The pair have a projected separation of about. No, that's if it's a double star. How bright is Antares? Now it might give us an entirely different picture. And it does, and nothing even close to what is said elsewhere. So there's still a lot of, how many suns can fit in Antares? 700 times our sun's diameter. So let's look at that. Antares has 700 times our sun's diameter, and if placed in the center of our solar system, Antares' outer surface would lie between the orbits of Mars and Jupiter. So that's a big extent. How many? Now let's see. How many suns? What does it say? How many suns can fit in Antares? Let's ask that about Betelgeuse. How many suns can fit in Betelgeuse, which we, saw was 140,000 solar luminosities. Okay. I'm not sure we're going to get the answer here. Oh, 1.6 billion suns would fit inside. Okay, I'm going to take a rain check on this. That's a huge estimate. How many suns can fit in the largest star? The biggest star, size-wise, is VY Canis Majoris, in the greater bear, in the great dog, which is about 2,000 times wider than our sun. And you could fit 9.3 billion of our suns into VY Canis Majoris. Well, Joe, does that get us started? I can only imagine, what is the biggest star ever found? You know, you get addicted to this stuff. And it says the largest known star in the universe is UY Scuti, a hypergiant with a radius around 1,700 times larger than the sun. However, it looks like Betelgeuse or VY Canis Majoris is even bigger. So look, you know, we have an impermanent estimation by even brilliant scientists about these things. But I do think that we can get some idea of the tremendous scope, magnitudes, intensities of these stars relative to our tiny dwarf star Sirius, which means so very much to us on Earth. You see how relativity plays into this. So from Karsten, in the book of The Keys of Enoch by Hurtak, I met him, by the way, they warn about the use of energy from the Great Bear because some negative forces there. They recommend Orion. Well, it's an incomplete picture, Karsten. The Great Bear represents the 7 internal head centers of the one about whom naught may be said, whereas the zodiac represents the 12 petals of the central lotus in the head. It's like saying, you know, don't worry about the head because the heart is more important. You have to have a more complete picture. And I think that the presumption of negative energy from the Great Bear is erroneous. And I think that any form can act or can be responded to in a somewhat negative way, depending upon the form, but the energies there are tremendously beneficent. And it's just an error as far as I'm concerned. Okay. Well, maybe that's enough of, and of course, you know, just to round it all out, and there are triangles between all these sources. And so, you know, in terms of being a universal being, the nature of our present incarnation is just a blip in the cosmic design. But if you trace it to the heart of things and you have the power of identification, you'll know that there's only one being, good or bad, and in essence, always beyond good and evil. It's the form and limitation that makes for good and evil. Okay, so let's just have the slightest little meditation now. Tomorrow morning, we'll be working on the reappearance of the Christ at the usual YouTube live link and the two of you will be presenting that. And then in the evening on Zoom, and Michael, I don't know if Michael's still here, or Joe, if you have access to it, do we have the Zoom link for the identify as being?
I can put it in.
Okay, there you are. You're back, or I noticed your voice changed. Okay. So pay attention to the chat box, because that will take you to identify as being tomorrow night, night here in Europe, at 5 p.m. GMT. And then the day after that, at night, the Cosmic Fire in Depth. We're working on the fire by friction at first. So just imagine you're standing on the mountaintop, the symbolic mountaintop, with your group brothers and sisters, and you're looking up at the starry heavens, and you see these great streams of energy connecting everything. These streams of force and energy linking everything with everything else. And you realize that as vast as these great constellational sources may be, triangulated with other constellations, and as many as the stars may be, triangulated with other stars, that you and your group are part of that. And tiny though we be, as DK calls us, microscopic man, that our relationship with all of the great sources is definite. Everything is in relation. And one of the ways, best ways of describing how that science of relations works is through the science of triangles. So however many trillions or quadrillions or sextillions, septillions, of years it takes to complete one of an infinitude of universes, your perspective, my perspective, will again be that as within the starry heavens, and not just as the tiniest insignificant subatomic particle. And that our beginning is to work together in the normal triangle meditation to help love in action, which is goodwill, prevail upon the earth. And that when we have done that to the point of success, whole new ranges of knowledge will come in for us. And we will have, as we in a sense already do have, universal omniscience. You've just forgotten about it, that's all. Through the process of dimensional sealing, S-E-A-L-I-N-G, As the emanation becomes more and more constricted, its range of consciousness becomes more and more constricted, and it forgets where it came from. So even when we're doing what apparently is the simple triangle work with depth of feeling and the power of will, we try to remember what's behind it all. And a huge triangular structure, so big you can't describe it, lies behind our very simple attempt to achieve goodwill and light between ourselves. So we study the big to know the little, we study the little to know the big. And we persist. So let's create invocation. From the point of light within the mind of God, let light stream forth into the minds of men. Let light descend on earth. From the point of love within the heart of God, let love stream forth into the hearts of men. May Christ return to earth. From the center where the will of God is known, let purpose guide the little wills of men, the purpose which the masters know and serve. From the center which we call the race of men, let the plan of love and light work out, and may it seal the door where evil dwells. Let light and love and power restore the plan on earth. Okay, everyone, thank you, and see some of you tomorrow morning, I guess, our morning, and I don't know what time it will be. It's a little tough in the United States and South America, but we alternate for the reappearance of the Christ meditation, and then in the evening for identify as being. It should be in the chat box. I think Michael put it there. I see something from Zoom, so I assume that's it. Yeah, that's it. And then, of course, on Friday, we will have Glamour in the morning, and then in the evening, Cosmic Fire in depth. So, lots of love to you all and many blessings from the whole team. And just persist, deepening your meditation, deepening your study, and serving as best you can with what gifts you have and in the context of the group. So, see you soon. Bye-bye.